Admiral Jack Morrison stood in the Great Hall of the Galactic Council Station. The massive chamber stretched high above him with walls that gleamed like polished silver. 47 different alien species sat in curved rows around the central platform where he waited. Each species looked different from the others. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few seemed to be made of light itself. The human delegation sat behind Morrison in a small section marked for guests. Dr. Lisa Carter adjusted her formal diplomatic uniform and tried to hide her nervousness. Commander Rick Hayes kept his face calm, but his hands were tight on his chair arms. Maria Santos looked around at all the alien faces staring down at them. The Zephyrian Prime Minister rose from her crystal throne. Her body looked like living glass that broke sunlight into rainbow colors. When she spoke, her voice sounded like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. The Galactic Council will now hear the charges against the human species. A massive creature that looked like a six-armed bear stood up from the Thurian section. His voice was deep and rough. Humans expand too fast. They take worlds without asking permission. They build weapons when we tell them not to. They refuse to follow our rules about how many colonies they can have. The Andromedan delegate floated in a tank of blue liquid. Bubbles rose around her fish-like body as she spoke through a translator. Human traders sell goods for less money than our established prices. They make deals with species outside the council. They ignore our trade agreements. One by one, more aliens stood to speak against humanity. The Vegans complained that human ships entered their space without permission. The Altarians said humans terraformed planets too quickly without studying the existing life forms. The ancient ethereals whispered that humans were too unpredictable to trust. Morrison listened to each accusation without changing his expression. He had served in the human military for 30 years and had faced worse than angry words. But he knew that the future of his entire species depended on what happened in this room today. Dr. Carter stood when the accusations ended. She walked to the center of the platform and looked up at the hundreds of alien faces watching her. Honored delegates, we came here seeking friendship and membership in your great alliance. We have never hidden our nature or our goals. She paused and took a deep breath. Yes, humans expand quickly into space. But we only settle on dead worlds or empty systems. We bring life where none existed before. Yes, we defend ourselves when threatened, but we have never started a war or attacked peaceful neighbors. Carter continued speaking with growing confidence. We offer you our knowledge, our determination, and our loyalty. Humans keep their promises. When we make friends, we stand by them. When we join a cause, we give everything we have to make it succeed. The Kepler delegate, a small, peaceful being that looked like a walking flower, raised one thin arm. Perhaps humans are different from us, but different does not mean dangerous. Their colonies are well managed. Their people work hard. They have helped several species with medical and technical problems. But the flower being was alone in supporting humanity. The other delegates whispered among themselves and made their decision quickly. The Zephyrian Prime Minister stood again, and her crystal form seemed to grow brighter. The Galactic Council has voted. 46 species vote to banish humanity from all council space. One species abstained from voting. The verdict is final. The hall fell silent except for the gentle hum of the station's engines. Morrison felt the weight of those words settle on his shoulders like a heavy blanket. Banishment meant that humans would have to leave every world, every station, and every settlement in council territory. You have one standard year to remove all human presence from council space, the Prime Minister continued. Return to your small corner of the galaxy near the star you call Sol. Do not trouble the civilized species again. Dr. Carter's face went pale. Commander Hayes closed his eyes and shook his head slowly. Maria Santos stared at the floor. 20 years of diplomatic work had just been destroyed in a few minutes. But Morrison did not look defeated. He stood straight, and walked to the center of the platform. His voice carried clearly through the vast chamber when he spoke. "You see our growth as greed, and our strength as aggression. You mistake our curiosity for conquest and our determination for defiance. But we know what we are, and we know what we can become." He looked around at all the alien faces watching him. "You want us to stay in our small corner of space and be quiet? You want us to accept limits on our future, but humans have never accepted being told they cannot reach higher or go farther." Morrison turned toward the exit where his delegation waited. "History will remember this day, but it may not remember it the way you think it will." The human delegation walked out of the chamber in silence. Behind them, the aliens began discussing what would happen to human territories and trade routes. None of them imagined that they had just made the biggest mistake in galactic history. The news traveled fast through human space. On Earth, President Susan Davis called an emergency meeting of the Global Assembly. Representatives from every human colony, space station, and outpost joined the session through quantum communication links. The great assembly hall buzzed with angry voices and worried faces. Commander Rachel Torres was exploring an uncharted star system when the recall message reached her ship. The New Horizon had been mapping stellar formations beyond the edge of Council space for 6 months. Her crew of scientists and survey specialists had found 3 potentially habitable worlds in systems that no other species had ever visited. "Captain, we're getting priority messages from Earth Command," reported Lieutenant Ben Parker from his navigation station. His young face looked confused as he read the incoming data. "They want all human ships to return to Sol space immediately. Something about a council banishment order." Dr. Amy Chen looked up from her research station where she had been studying samples from the 3rd planet. "That makes no sense. We're not even in council territory out here. These systems are completely unexplored." Torres frowned as she read the full message on her command screen. The Council had given humanity 1 year to withdraw from all their territory. That meant abandoning colonies that had existed for decades and forcing millions of people to leave their homes. On the distant world of New Terra, Governor Steve Williams faced an impossible choice. The planet sat just inside the border of Council space, but had been a human colony for 50 years. 3 million people had built their lives there. They had farms, cities, factories, and schools. Children had been born there who had never seen Earth. "Governor, the colonists are asking what we're going to do," said Colonel Dan Mitchell, commander of the Planetary Defense Force. He was a tall man with gray hair who had served on New Terra for 15 years. "Some families want to pack up and leave. Others are talking about staying no matter what the council says." Williams stood at his office window looking out at the sprawling capital city. Human engineering had turned a barren world into a garden. The terraforming projects had taken 30 years to complete. Rivers now flowed where deserts had been. Forests grew where only rock had existed before. "Send a message to Earth," Williams said quietly. "Tell President Davis that New Terra requests permission to remain. We didn't come this far to be turned away by alien politics." Similar conversations were happening across human space. On mining station Omega-7 Captain Jake, Sullivan led his workers in preparing defenses around their asteroid base. The station produced rare metals that were essential for advanced technology. Sullivan had spent 10 years building the operation from nothing. "They can try to move us if they want," Sullivan told his crew during their daily meeting. "But this rock doesn't belong to any council species. We found it, we built on it, and we're staying put." President Davis made her announcement from the steps of the Global Assembly building. Reporters from across human space watched as she delivered the words that would change everything. "The Galactic Council has shown us their true nature. They do not want humanity as partners or friends. They want us contained, limited, and reduced to a minor power in our own small corner of space." She paused and looked directly into the cameras. "But humanity has never accepted limits on our potential. We have never agreed to be told how far we can reach or how much we can achieve. If the Council will not welcome us as partners, then we will forge our own path among the stars. The vote in the Global Assembly was overwhelming. The expansion initiative passed 847 to 23. Instead of retreating to Sol space as the Council demanded, humanity would accelerate their growth into unexplored regions. They would seek new worlds, new resources, and new allies among the species that the Council had ignored or overlooked. Admiral Morrison, now appointed head of the Strategic Expansion Command, began planning the greatest movement of people and resources in human history. Ships that had been designed for exploration were converted for long-range colonization. Industrial facilities were dismantled and prepared for transport to new worlds. "We have advantages the Council doesn't know about," Morrison told his staff during a planning session. "Our ships are faster and more efficient than theirs. Our people adapt to new environments better than most species, and we've been exploring beyond their borders for years." Dr. Carter, now serving as Director of Alien Relations, had a different perspective on the crisis. "The Council made a mistake when they banished us. There are dozens of species out there who have been rejected by the Council or who chose not to join them. Now we have a chance to offer them something better." The Topo. First test came when human scouts discovered a group of refugee ships drifting in deep space. The vessels belonged to the Nexari, whose homeworld had been destroyed by a solar flare 3 years earlier. The Council had offered them limited aid and restricted settlement options. Thousands of Nexari had been living in crowded ships ever since, hoping to find a new home. Captain Alex Turner commanded the first human ship to make contact with the Nexari fleet. The aliens were suspicious at first, but their desperation overcame their caution. When Turner offered them full citizenship, rights, and permanent settlement on human worlds, the Nexari leaders could hardly believe what they were hearing. "You would give us worlds to live on?" asked Elder Vash, the leader of the Nexari Council. His people had blue-green skin and large eyes that showed their emotions clearly. "You would treat us as equals rather than refugees?" Turner smiled and extended his hand in the human gesture of friendship. "We're all refugees now. We might as well help each other find new homes among the stars." 2 years after the banishment, humanity's response had shocked even their harshest critics. Instead of retreating into Sol space as expected, human expansion had accelerated beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. Captain Alex Turner commanded one of the new Pathfinder-class ships, vessels designed specifically for rapid exploration and colonization of unknown systems. "Jump complete, sir," reported Navigator Carol Price as their ship emerged from hyperspace. The stars ahead of them had never been cataloged by any known species. 7 planets orbited the yellow star, and initial scans showed 3 of them might support human life. Turner smiled as sensor data flowed across his command screens. "Mark this system as Phoenix 7 and begin full planetary surveys. According to our intelligence reports, we should find more Nexari refugee ships somewhere in this sector." The integration of the Nexari had proven to be one of humanity's greatest successes. On the world called Haven, Director Kelly Robinson oversaw the first major human-alien cooperation project. The Nexari brought advanced shield technology and engineering skills, while humans provided worlds to settle and protection from hostile forces. "The 3rd colony ship arrived this morning," reported Dr. Tony Mitchell, the project's alien relations specialist. He was a middle-aged man who had learned to speak the Nexari language fluently. "Elder Vash says they want to name their new settlement New Sanctuary. They're proposing a joint human-Nexari governing council." Robinson nodded approvingly. The partnership was working better than anyone had hoped. Nexari engineers were helping design the next generation of human ships, while human terraforming experts were preparing new worlds for settlement. Both species were stronger together than they had been apart. Back on Earth, Admiral Morrison studied intelligence reports in his office at Strategic Expansion Command. The news was both encouraging and troubling. Human expansion was succeeding beyond all projections, but it was also attracting unwanted attention from the Council. The Valdris have officially requested a defense pact, reported Intelligence Chief Helen Brooks. She was a sharp-eyed woman who had spent 20 years analyzing alien political systems. That's the 7th non-council species to approach us this month. Even some council member species are starting to ask questions about why these aliens prefer human protection. Morrison leaned back in his chair and considered the implications. The council had banished humanity to prevent them from becoming a threat to galactic stability. Instead, they had created exactly the kind of rival power they had feared most. The breakthrough came when human explorers discovered what they called the frontier worlds. Commander Julie Ross led the diplomatic mission to the cluster of 43, star systems that lay far beyond council influence. The region was rich in rare minerals and inhabited by 17 different species that had never joined the Galactic Council. Most of these species were deemed too remote for council interest. Ross reported during her briefing to Admiral Morrison. But they're perfect for our expansion plans. They have resources we need, and they want protection from raiders and hostile neighbors. The negotiations took 6 months, but the results exceeded everyone's expectations. 16 of the 17 species agreed to join what became known as the Frontier Alliance. The agreement provided mutual defense, free trade, and shared technology development among all member species. The 17th species presented a unique challenge. The Korath were a warrior race that stood 7 feet tall and had 4 arms. They demanded single combat to determine whether humanity was worthy of their respect. Lieutenant Commander Paul Davis volunteered for the challenge, despite being half the size of his opponent. The ritual combat took place on the Korath homeworld in an arena surrounded by thousands of alien spectators. Davis faced Warrior Prime, Thak, the greatest fighter in Korath history. The human was faster and smarter, but the alien was incredibly strong and experienced. Davis won through cunning rather than brute force. He used the arena's environment to his advantage, trapping his opponent in a position where strength meant nothing and speed meant everything. When Thak submitted with honor, the entire Korath nation pledged their loyalty to the Frontier Alliance. "You fight like a true warrior," Thak told Davis after the combat ended. "Small in body but large in spirit. Humans have earned the friendship of the Korath forever." The alliance grew stronger every month. Human colonies provided food and manufactured goods. Nexari engineers designed better ships and equipment. Korath warriors trained alliance defense forces. Other species contributed their own unique skills and resources. Captain Turner, now commanding a small fleet of exploration vessels, discovered that the Council was beginning to take notice of Alliance activities. "We're detecting Council scout ships in 3 nearby systems," reported his tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah Phillips. "They're not being aggressive, but they're definitely watching us." Turner wasn't surprised. The Alliance controlled resources that the Council wanted and protected trade routes that the Council had ignored. More importantly, the Alliance was proving that species could cooperate without Council oversight or control. On Haven, the Joint Human-Nexari Council was planning their next major expansion. Elder Vash worked closely with Director Robinson to identify systems that could support large-scale colonization efforts. Their success had attracted refugees from across the galaxy. "We have applications from 12 more species," Robinson reported during the weekly council meeting. "Word is spreading that the Alliance offers something the Council never could: real partnership instead of domination." Admiral Morrison reviewed the latest expansion reports with growing satisfaction. Humanity had been banished from a small corner of Council space. In response, they had claimed an entire region of the galaxy and built an alliance that was growing stronger every day. "The Council wanted to contain us," he told President Davis during their monthly security briefing. "Instead, they taught us that we were strong enough to stand on our own. Now we're showing the galaxy that there's an alternative to Council rule. The sea." Irony was not lost on anyone in human leadership. The species that had rejected humanity for being too aggressive and expansionist had created exactly the kind of rival they had tried to prevent. And every day, more aliens were choosing the Alliance over the Council. 5 years after the banishment, the Galactic Council could no longer ignore what they called the human problem. Emergency sessions had become routine in the Council chambers as reports poured in about human expansion and alien defections. What had begun as a simple expulsion had evolved into a serious threat to everything the Council represented. Admiral Morrison, now gray-haired but more determined than ever, stood on the bridge of the battleship Defiance as it patrolled the borders of Alliance space. Human shipyards had been working around the clock to build vessels that could match anything in the Council fleet. The Defiance was proof that humanity had learned to build for war as well as peace. Intelligence reports, Council fleet movements. In the Vega sector, announced Commander Scott Hayes from his tactical station. He was a young officer who had grown up during the expansion years and knew nothing but human independence. 3 battle groups heading toward our territory. The crisis began when the Council discovered that the Kepler system had secretly joined the Frontier Alliance. The Keplerians were the only species that had refused to vote for humanity's banishment 5 years earlier. Their decision to ally with humans instead of remaining neutral sent shockwaves through the galactic political system. The Keplerian ambassador's announcement in the Council chambers had been brief but devastating. My people have observed both the Council and the Alliance for 5 years. We choose to stand with those who offer partnership rather than domination. On the industrial world of New Pittsburgh, Director Frank Sullivan watched as the latest batch of Defender-class warships rolled off the production lines. The planet had been transformed from a barren rock into one of the galaxy's most advanced manufacturing centers. Human efficiency combined with alien technology had created something unprecedented. The shipyards are operating at maximum capacity, reported Chief Engineer Nancy Wells. She was a tough woman who had spent her career building impossible things in impossible places. The alien workforce integration has exceeded all our projections. We're building ships faster than anyone thought possible. The Council's first move was economic warfare. They imposed a complete trade embargo on all Alliance space and threatened sanctions against any species that maintained commercial relations with humans. The response surprised them completely. Rather than weakening Alliance resolve, the embargo strengthened the bonds between member species. The Korath increased their metal production to replace Council imports. The Nexari developed new technologies to replace Council equipment. Human colonies ramped up food production to feed the entire Alliance. Dr. Lisa Carter, now Secretary of Alien Affairs, coordinated the Alliance response from the government center on Haven. The Draxi have offered to share their agricultural technology to offset any food shortages. The Korath want to provide military advisors to all Alliance worlds. Even the usually neutral Altarians are considering joining us. The embargo had an unexpected side effect. Species throughout the galaxy began to question why the Council was so determined to destroy the Alliance. If humans were truly as dangerous as the Council claimed, why were so many different aliens choosing to ally with them? The situation escalated when Council forces attempted to blockade the Nexari homeworld of New Sanctuary. Captain Alex Turner, now commanding a full battle fleet, arrived to find Thurian warships surrounding the planet in a threatening formation. "This is Captain Turner of the Alliance Defense Force," he broadcast on all frequencies. His voice was calm but carried an unmistakable note of warning. "New Sanctuary is under the protection of the Frontier Alliance. Any hostile action against Alliance citizens will be considered an act of war." The Thurian fleet commander responded with typical Council arrogance. "This system is within Council jurisdiction. You will withdraw immediately or face the consequences." Turner smiled grimly and activated his ship's combat systems. "The only thing we're withdrawing is our patience with Council threats." The standoff lasted for 6 tense days. Council commanders, accustomed to dealing with species that backed down under pressure, found themselves facing humans who simply refused to retreat. Alliance ships took defensive positions around New Sanctuary, while Nexari civilians were evacuated to underground shelters. The first shot came when a Thurian destroyer fired across the bow of a human supply convoy. The warning shot was meant to intimidate, but it had the opposite effect. Turner's response was swift and decisive. All ships engage enemy forces, protect the convoy, and defend Alliance territory. The Battle of New Sanctuary lasted only 4 hours, but it changed galactic politics forever. Human ships, enhanced with Alliance technology and crewed by multiple species working in perfect coordination, systematically dismantled the Council. Blockade Korath warriors served alongside human marines on boarding parties. Nexari engineers kept the ships running at peak efficiency during combat. Other Alliance species contributed their own unique skills to the battle effort. When the smoke cleared, 2/3 of the Council fleet was destroyed or captured. The remaining ships fled back to Council space with reports that shocked their leaders. The Alliance hadn't just won a battle, they had demonstrated military capabilities that rivaled the entire Council Navy. The aftermath was even more significant than the battle itself. News of the Council's defeat spread across the galaxy faster than quantum communications could carry it. For the first time in over 1,000 years, the Galactic Council had been beaten in open combat. On dozens of worlds, oppressed species began to whisper about alternatives to Council rule. The Alliance had proven that it was possible to stand up to the galaxy's greatest power and win. More importantly, they had shown that different species could work together as equals rather than as rulers and subjects. President Davis addressed the Alliance from the Great Assembly Hall on Haven. Representatives from 43 species listened as she outlined humanity's vision for the future of galactic civilization. "We did not seek this conflict," she declared, her words broadcast across half the galaxy. "We came to the stars in peace, seeking only the opportunity to grow and contribute to galactic society. The Council chose to see our growth as a threat, rather than a gift." Her voice grew stronger as she continued. "They chose isolation over cooperation, fear over friendship, control over partnership. But we have shown the galaxy that there is another way. Species can work together as equals. Different peoples can build something greater than any of them could achieve alone." The speech was heard on Council worlds as well as Alliance territory. For many aliens, it was the first time they had heard someone speak of galactic politics. In terms of cooperation rather than domination, the seeds of revolution had been planted across the galaxy. The news of humanity's victory at New Sanctuary spread across the galaxy like wildfire. For the first time in over a millennium, the Galactic Council had been defeated in open combat. The impossible had happened, and the shockwaves were felt on every civilized world in known space. The Council's response was predictable, but ultimately futile. They mobilized their combined fleets for a massive assault on Alliance space, confident that their superior numbers would quickly crush the upstart coalition. They assembled the largest war fleet in galactic history, drawing ships from every member species and calling in ancient debts and obligations. Admiral Morrison, now commanding the combined Alliance fleet from the flagship Liberty, watched as the enemy armada approached through hyperspace. Intelligence reports indicated that the Council fleet outnumbered the Alliance forces 3-1. On paper, it should have been a hopeless battle. "Sir, we're detecting the Council vanguard," reported Captain Lisa Morgan from the tactical station. She was a veteran officer who had served with Morrison since the early expansion days. 600 ships in the first wave, with more jumping in behind them. Morrison studied the tactical display with calm concentration. The Council commanders expected to face the same kind of rigid, traditional fleet tactics they had used for centuries. Instead, they would encounter something entirely new: true cooperation between species that had learned to fight as one people. The Second Battle of Kepler Prime began at dawn on the 7th day of the 10th month. Council ships moved in precise formations that had been perfected over hundreds of years. Their strategy was simple: use overwhelming firepower to destroy the Alliance fleet in a single decisive engagement. The Alliance response was chaos to Council eyes, but perfect coordination to those who understood it. Human ships moved like dancers, flowing around enemy formations and striking at weak points. Korath vessels charged directly into battle, their warriors eager for combat. Nexari ships provided technical support and electronic warfare capabilities that confused Council sensors. "The enemy flagship is breaking formation," reported Commander Hayes from his position at the communications station. "Multiple Council ships are requesting permission to withdraw. The Andromedans are asking for terms." The battle lasted 3 days and ended with the complete collapse of Council military power. But humanity's true victory came not from their weapons, but from the example they had set. As Council species watched their fleets fall to the Alliance, many began to question why they had ever opposed human expansion. On the 3rd day of battle, something unprecedented happened. The Zephyrian Third Fleet, one of the Council's most elite units, switched sides in the middle of combat. The Crystal Beings had watched Alliance ships rescue Council survivors from damaged vessels and realized they were fighting alongside the wrong side. "This is Admiral Crystalline of the Zephyrian Third Fleet," came the broadcast that stunned both sides. "We are ceasing hostilities and requesting permission to join the Alliance. We have seen enough death caused by Council pride." Similar defections followed throughout the remaining battle. Council species that had joined the organization out of fear rather than loyalty saw their chance to escape. The great alliance that had ruled the galaxy for over 1,000 years crumbled in a matter of hours. The Korath Admiral Thrak, now serving alongside humans in the Alliance fleet, summed up the sentiment that many felt. Humans do not conquer worlds. They liberate them. They do not demand submission. They offer partnership. This is why we follow them to the stars. In the aftermath of their defeat, the Galactic Council ceased to exist as a functioning government. 23 species immediately petitioned to join the Frontier Alliance. Others demanded the complete restructuring of galactic politics. The old order, built on fear and control, had been shattered beyond repair. President Davis traveled to Earth for the signing ceremony that would establish the Galactic Democratic Alliance. The charter was signed in the same Global Assembly building where humanity's expansion had been authorized years earlier. Representatives from 67 species attended the ceremony. "Today we establish something that has never existed before," Davis announced to the gathered delegates. "A truly democratic government that represents all species equally. No one will be forced to join, and no one will be denied membership because of their size, location, or military power." The new alliance was based on principles that the old Council had never understood. Each species, regardless of size or military strength, would have an equal voice in the democratic government. Decisions would be made by majority vote rather than by the strongest species imposing their will on the weakest. Dr. Carter, now serving as the first Secretary General of the Galactic Democratic Alliance, worked to establish the new government's institutions. The headquarters would be on Haven, the world where humans and aliens had first learned to work together as equals. "We're receiving membership applications from species across the galaxy," Carter reported during the first session of the new Galactic Senate. "Even former Council species are asking to join under our democratic charter, rather than trying to rebuild their old system." Admiral Morrison, now an old man but still sharp as his flagship's sensor array, stood on the observation deck of the Liberty watching new construction in Earth orbit. Human and alien workers labored side by side, building the ships that would carry the Alliance to distant galaxies and unexplored regions of space. "Funny how things work out," he said to his aide, Commander Sarah Phillips. "The Council banished us to keep us contained in our small corner of space. Instead, they taught us that we were strong enough to stand on our own and showed us that we could offer the galaxy something better than they ever did. The final irony came when the Zephyrian Prime Minister, the same individual who had pronounced humanity's banishment 6 years earlier, requested a private meeting with President Davis. The crystalline being's words, when they came, carried the weight of a transformed galaxy. "We feared your growth because we had forgotten how to grow ourselves. We mistook your strength for aggression because we had grown weak and complacent. The Council sought to contain humanity, but instead we freed the galaxy from our own limitations." The Prime Minister paused, her crystal form reflecting the light from the stars visible through the station's windows. "Perhaps it is time for us to learn from you how to reach for the stars once more. Will the Alliance accept a species that was once your greatest enemy?" Davis smiled and extended her hand in the universal gesture of friendship. "The Alliance accepts all species that believe in democracy, cooperation, and the right of every people to reach for the stars. Welcome to the future." Humanity had been banished from a small corner of the galaxy. In response, they had claimed the universe itself and shown every species in known space that there were no limits to what could be achieved when people refused to accept the word impossible. 3 years after the formation of the Galactic Democratic Alliance, humanity's hunger for exploration had not diminished. Captain Turner, now Admiral of the Deep Space Exploration Fleet, stood on the bridge of the survey ship Endeavour as it prepared to enter a region of space that no known species had ever visited. "Final systems check complete, Admiral," reported Navigator Kelly Stevens from her station. The young officer had grown up during the Alliance years and knew the galaxy as a place of infinite possibilities rather than rigid boundaries. "All departments, report ready for long-range exploration." The Endeavour was unlike any ship that had ever been built. It combined human engineering with technology from a dozen Alliance species. Nexari shield generators protected the hull, while Korath armor plating provided additional defense. Zephyrian sensors could detect energy signatures across vast distances, and Draxi bioscanners could identify life forms from light years away. Dr. Amy Chen, now the Alliance's chief xenobiologist, supervised a team of scientists from 8 different species. Their mission was to explore the galactic regions beyond the old Council borders and make contact with any intelligent life they encountered. "We're crossing into uncharted space now," Chen announced, as the ship's sensors began detecting new star systems. Initial scans show at least 40 systems within detection range. Several show signs of industrial activity. Turner smiled as he watched the data flow across his screens. Every new system represented potential new allies, new knowledge, and new opportunities for growth. The Alliance had proven that cooperation between species could achieve more than any single race working alone. On Haven, President Davis met with the Alliance Science Council to review reports from exploration fleets across the galaxy. The democratic government had expanded beyond anyone's wildest dreams, now encompassing over 100 species spread across thousands of systems. "The exploration fleets are discovering new species every month," reported Dr. Mitchell, now Director of Xenological Studies. "Most are eager to learn about the Alliance, and many want to establish diplomatic relations. We're running out of trained diplomats to handle all the first contact situations." The success brought new challenges. The Alliance had grown so large that governing it effectively required constant innovation. The Democratic Senate now included representatives from species with completely different concepts of time, space, and decision-making. Some thought in terms of individual choices, while others made decisions as collective minds. Commander Hayes, now serving as Director of Alliance Security, briefed the President on a different kind of challenge. "We're detecting signs of another major galactic power beyond the outer rim. Long-range sensors have picked up artificial structures and energy signatures that don't match any known technology." The discovery of the hegemony changed everything. Deep space probes revealed a collection of star systems controlled by a machine intelligence that had conquered dozens of organic species. Unlike the Alliance's voluntary cooperation, the hegemony maintained order through complete technological domination. Admiral Morrison, now serving as the Alliance's senior military advisor, studied the intelligence reports with growing concern. This machine empire has been expanding for over 2,000 years. They convert organic species into cybernetic slaves and strip entire systems of resources to build more machines. The first contact came when Alliance exploration ship Pioneer encountered a hegemony patrol in what both sides considered empty space. Captain Ross, commanding the Pioneer, found herself facing vessels that were larger and more heavily armed than anything in the Alliance fleet. "Unknown vessels, you have entered hegemony space," came the mechanical voice over the communication system. "Submit to conversion or be destroyed. Resistance is not permitted." Ross had no intention of submitting to anyone. "This is Captain Julie Ross of the Alliance ship Pioneer. We are peaceful explorers seeking diplomatic contact with your government. We request safe passage and the opportunity to establish formal relations." The response was immediate and violent. Hegemony ships opened fire without further communication. The Pioneer's shields held against the initial barrage, but Ross knew her single ship couldn't fight an entire patrol fleet. She ordered an immediate retreat to Alliance space. The encounter triggered the largest military mobilization in Alliance history. President Davis addressed the Galactic Senate from the Great Assembly Hall on Haven, her words broadcast to every Alliance world. "We face a threat unlike anything our species have encountered before. The hegemony seeks not just conquest, but the complete elimination of free will and individual choice. They would turn every living being into a component in their vast machine." Faye paused to let her words sink in before continuing. "But we have something they do not understand. We have chosen to work together not because we were forced to, but because we believe cooperation makes us all stronger. We will defend that choice against any threat." The Alliance response was swift and overwhelming. Human shipyards worked alongside alien manufacturing centers to produce the largest fleet in galactic history. Korath warriors trained alongside human marines and Nexari engineers. Former Council species that had joined the Alliance contributed their own military expertise and resources. Admiral Turner led the Alliance fleet toward the hegemony border, but he had no intention of starting a war if it could be avoided. His first priority was rescuing organic species that were still fighting against machine domination. "Admiral, we're receiving distress signals from the Tau Ceti system," reported Communications Officer Phillips. "It appears to be a coalition of organic species fighting against hegemony conversion fleets." The rescue mission became the first major battle between the Alliance and the hegemony. Turner's fleet arrived to find a desperate struggle between machine ships and the remnants of 6 different organic species that had banded together for survival. "This is Admiral Turner of the Galactic Democratic Alliance," he broadcast to both sides. "Organic vessels, we are here to provide assistance. Hegemony forces, withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The battle that followed demonstrated the fundamental difference between the two powers. Hegemony ships fought with mechanical precision, but no creativity or adaptability. Alliance vessels, crewed by multiple species working in harmony, used tactics and strategies that the machines couldn't predict or counter. When the hegemony fleet was destroyed, the rescued species were amazed by what they had witnessed. The Tausetians, Rigelians, and 4 other races had been fighting for survival for decades. The idea that so many different species could work together voluntarily was almost beyond their comprehension. "You came to help us even though we are strangers," said Elder Tav of the Tausetians. His people had been reduced to a few thousand survivors hiding on barren asteroids. "Why would you risk your lives for people you have never met?" Turner smiled and offered the traditional Alliance greeting. "Because every sentient being has the right to choose their own future. That's what the Alliance stands for, and that's what we'll always defend." The rescue missions continued as Alliance fleets pushed deeper into contested space. They discovered that organic resistance movements existed throughout the hegemony, waiting for someone strong enough to challenge the machines. The Alliance provided that strength and the hope that freedom was possible. The war between the Alliance and the hegemony had been raging for 2 years, when Admiral Turner made the discovery that would change everything. Deep within captured hegemony territory, Alliance forces found something that the machines had been trying to hide, a planet full of organic beings who had successfully resisted conversion for over a century. The world was called Sanctuary by its defenders, though the hegemony designated it as Target Prime in their tactical databases. The planet's inhabitants were the Vorthon, a species of natural engineers who had built defenses that even the machines couldn't overcome. "Admiral, we're receiving a signal from the planet's surface," reported communications specialist Wilson, from his station aboard Turner's flagship. The transmission was heavily encrypted but carried a message of desperate hope. "This is Engineer Prime Kex of the Vorthon Resistance. We have monitored your battles against the machine oppressors. Can you provide assistance? We have information about hegemony weaknesses that could help end this war." Turner didn't hesitate. "Prepare a landing force. We're going down to meet with these people." The surface of Sanctuary was a fortress world unlike anything Alliance forces had ever seen. The Vorthon had spent 100 years turning their planet into an impregnable stronghold. Underground cities connected by tunnels that the machines couldn't map, shield generators built into mountain ranges that could withstand orbital bombardment, weapon systems that used the planet's magnetic field to create defensive barriers. Engineer Prime Kex was a tall, thin being with 4 arms and skin that changed color to match his emotions. When he met Turner in the underground command center, his coloration showed both hope and desperate determination. "Admiral Turner, your alliance offers something we thought was lost forever. The possibility of victory against the machines," Kex said, as he activated a holographic display showing hegemony territory. "We have spent decades studying their technology and tactics. We believe we have found their central weakness." The Vorthon had discovered that the hegemony was controlled by a single artificial intelligence located in a massive complex at the galaxy's core. This central mind directed all machine activities across thousands of systems, but it was also the source of their greatest vulnerability. The machines cannot function independently if they lose contact with the central mind. Kex explained as, "The hologram showed the complex network of communication relays that connected hegemony forces. If we could destroy their command center, every machine in the galaxy would shut down simultaneously." Turner studied the tactical display with growing excitement. The central mind was located in a heavily fortified system surrounded by multiple layers of automated defenses. Getting there would require the largest military operation in galactic history, but the potential rewards were enormous. "How do we get past their defenses?" Turner asked, already planning the assault in his mind. Kex's skin shifted to a hopeful blue-green color. "We have been building a special weapon for 50 years, a device that can disrupt the quantum communication network the machines use. But we need Alliance ships to deliver it to the target." The plan that emerged from weeks of joint planning was audacious beyond anything previously attempted. Alliance fleets would launch simultaneous attacks across hegemony space to draw machine forces away from the core systems. Meanwhile, a strike force would penetrate to the central mind's location and deploy the Vorthon weapon. President Davis approved the operation despite the enormous risks involved. "This may be our only chance to end the machine threat permanently," she told the Alliance Senate. "Every species in the galaxy deserves the right to remain free and organic." The final battle began with coordinated attacks in 12 different sectors. Alliance fleets, now including Vorthon technical specialists, engaged hegemony forces across a front that stretched halfway around the galaxy. The machines responded exactly as predicted, moving their mobile forces to counter the Alliance attacks. Admiral Morrison, now commanding the diversionary fleet in the Vega sector, watched as machine reinforcements rushed toward his position. His job was to keep them busy while Turner's strike force made its way to the core systems. "They're taking the bait," Morrison reported during the tactical briefing. Hegemony forces are moving away from their central territories to engage our fleets. Turner should have a clear path to the target. The strike force consisted of the fastest and most advanced ships in the Alliance fleet. Turner commanded from the stealth cruiser Shadow, a vessel that combined human engineering with Vorthan cloaking technology. Following behind were 12 other ships carrying the components of the quantum disruptor weapon. "Entering the core system now," reported Navigator Stevens as the strike force emerged from hyperspace near the central mine complex. What they saw made even veteran officers gasp in amazement. The machine intelligence had built itself a fortress that spanned an entire solar system. Artificial structures connected planets and moons in a vast network of computational power. Energy flowed between components in patterns that hurt to look at directly. This was the brain that controlled every machine in hegemony space. "Deploying the quantum disruptor," announced Engineer Prime Kex from his position at the weapon control station. The Vorthan had spent his entire life preparing for this moment. "All Alliance ships, maintain formation and protect the deployment." Sequence. The hegemony's automated defenses responded immediately. Thousands of defensive platforms opened fire on the Alliance ships, while machine fighters swarmed toward them like angry insects. The Shadow's shields flared under the concentrated bombardment, but the ship held together. Weapon deployment at 60%, Kex reported as his device sent tendrils of disrupting energy toward the central mine's communication nodes. 70%, 80%. Machine defenses concentrated their fire on the quantum disruptor, recognizing the threat it represented. Alliance ships threw themselves between the weapon and the attacking forces, accepting devastating damage to protect the deployment. 95%, Kex called out as his skin flashed bright yellow with excitement. "Deployment complete. Quantum disruptor is activating." The effect was immediate and spectacular. The central mine's communication network collapsed like a house of cards as quantum disruption spread through every relay and transmission node. Across the galaxy, machine forces simply stopped functioning as their connection to Central Command was severed. In the Vega sector, Admiral Morrison watched in amazement as hegemony ships went dark and drifted powerlessly through space. "All machine forces have ceased operation," he reported to Alliance Command. "Repeat, all machine forces have shut down." The war was over in a matter of hours. Without the central mine to coordinate their actions, the machines became nothing more than inert metal and circuits. Organic species that had been enslaved for generations found themselves suddenly free to reclaim their worlds and their futures. Turner stood on the bridge of the Shadow as rescue ships began arriving to help liberated organic populations across hegemony space. The galaxy had been transformed once again, but this time the change brought freedom rather than conquest. 10 years had passed since the fall of the machine hegemony, and the galaxy had transformed beyond all recognition. The Galactic Democratic Alliance now included over 300 species spread across 4 galactic arms. On the anniversary of humanity's original banishment, President Davis stood before the largest gathering of sentient beings in galactic history. The celebration took place on Unity Station, a massive orbital platform built in the space where the old Galactic Council chambers had once stood. Representatives from every known species in the galaxy attended the ceremony, including many that had been discovered in former hegemony territory. 15 years ago, humanity was banished from this very location, Davis began, her words translated into hundreds of languages and broadcast to billions of worlds. "We were told we were too dangerous, too aggressive, too unpredictable to be trusted with membership in galactic civilization." She paused and looked out at the sea of different faces watching her. Humans sat next to Korath warriors, while Nexari engineers worked alongside former council species and newly liberated hegemony survivors. The diversity was breathtaking. Today, we gather not as conquerors or subjects, but as equals in the greatest democratic alliance the galaxy has ever known. We have proven that cooperation is stronger than domination, that diversity is stronger than uniformity, and that freedom is stronger than any force that seeks to destroy it. Admiral Turner, now elderly but still serving as head of the exploration corps, watched the ceremony from his ship in orbit around the station. The Endeavour had just returned from a mission to the galaxy's edge, where his crew had made contact with an ancient species that claimed to have been exploring space for over 1,000,000 years. Admiral, we're receiving a priority message from the Andromedans, reported his communications officer. The former Council species had become one of the Alliance's most dedicated members after seeing how democracy worked in practice. Turner smiled as he read the message. It seems the Andromedans have found something interesting in their deep space surveys. They want to share their discovery with the Alliance Science Council. The Andromeda expedition had discovered evidence of other galaxies where intelligent life had developed. The implications were staggering. The Alliance had conquered their own galaxy through cooperation and democratic principles. Now they faced the possibility of making contact with entirely different forms of galactic civilization. Dr. Chen, now director of the Alliance Science Institute, presented the findings to the gathered delegates at Unity Station. We have detected artificial energy patterns from the Andromeda galaxy that suggest advanced technological civilizations. The patterns are unlike anything we have encountered in our own galaxy. The discovery sparked intense debate among Alliance members. Some species wanted to launch immediate exploration missions to the other galaxy. Others argued for caution, pointing out that previous contact with unknown powers had led to war. Still, others suggested that the Alliance should focus on continuing to help newly liberated species in their own galaxy. Engineer Prime Kex, now serving as the Alliance's chief technology advisor, offered a different perspective. We have learned that every challenge makes us stronger when we face it together. Perhaps these new civilizations could teach us things we have never imagined. The debate continued for months, but the outcome was never really in doubt. Humanity's drive to explore and discover had become part of the Alliance's fundamental character. The decision to launch the Intergalactic Exploration Project passed by an overwhelming majority in the Alliance Senate. Captain Ross, now commanding. The first intergalactic exploration vessel prepared for a journey that would take decades to complete. The ship Pathfinder was the most advanced vessel ever built, incorporating technology from dozens of Alliance species and carrying a crew representing every major galactic civilization. Final systems check complete, reported Navigator Phillips, as the massive ship prepared for its historic journey. All departments report ready for intergalactic travel. Ross stood on the bridge surrounded by crew members from 30 different species. The diversity that had once been seen as humanity's greatest weakness had become the Alliance's greatest strength. Different perspectives and abilities combining to achieve things that no single species could accomplish alone. Back on Earth, Admiral Morrison spent his final years writing the official history of humanity's expansion into space. His memoirs would become required reading for students across the galaxy, but he focused on a simple message. The greatest achievements come from refusing to accept limitations. The Council told us we were dangerous because we would not accept their boundaries, he wrote in his final chapter. They were right. We refused to accept limits on our growth, our exploration, or our potential, but we proved that danger and evil are not the same thing. Morrison looked out his window at the orbital shipyards, where the next generation of exploration vessels was taking shape. Human and alien workers labored side by side, building ships that would carry Alliance explorers to distant galaxies and unknown worlds. We chose to make our danger serve the cause of freedom rather than conquest. We chose to use our refusal to accept limits as a force for liberation rather than domination. That choice made all the difference. President Davis concluded the anniversary ceremony with words that would be remembered across the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity was banished for being too ambitious, too curious, too determined to reach beyond our assigned place. We accepted that judgment and proved it correct. We are dangerous to tyranny, threatening to oppression, and utterly destructive to anyone who tries to limit the potential of free beings. The crowd erupted in cheers that could be heard across the station. Representatives from species that had been enemies just years before stood together in celebration of their shared future. The diversity that had once divided them had become the source of their greatest strength. As the ceremony ended and delegates began returning to their home worlds, the Pathfinder completed its final preparations for the journey to Andromeda. The ship represented everything the Alliance had learned about cooperation, exploration, and the power of different species working together toward common goals. "This is Captain Ross of the Alliance vessel Pathfinder," came the broadcast that marked the beginning of the next great chapter in galactic history. Beginning intergalactic exploration mission. We carry the hopes and dreams of 300 species and the promise that freedom and cooperation will light our way among the stars. The ship disappeared into hyperspace, carrying its diverse crew toward unknown galaxies and infinite possibilities. Behind them, the Alliance continued to grow and prosper, proving every day that the greatest achievements come from refusing to accept the word impossible. Humanity had been banished for being too dangerous to galactic civilization. They had responded by becoming the most dangerous thing tyranny had ever faced, the living proof that freedom, cooperation, and unlimited potential could triumph over any force that sought to contain them. The stars themselves had become their legacy, and they shared that legacy freely with any being that chose to reach toward the infinite.